Have you ever, now or at any point in your life, felt those deep, intense connections with certain people? Those looks that spoke more than 1,000 words, those emotions that seemed to appear out of nowhere, that feeling that someone was made just for you. But let me ask you a question. What happens when that connection isn't reciprocated? What happens when the other person, despite all your feelings, doesn't choose you in the same way? Here is an uncomfortable truth that few are willing to accept. There is a psychological trap, a dangerous secret discovered by Carl Jung, the revolutionary psychologist who delved deep into the unconscious. This secret explains why men obsessively chase after women who reject them, only to suddenly leave them once they've won their affection. This pattern still affects relationships today, whether you're aware of it or not. If you're currently single or stuck in an unstable relationship, what you're about to learn could save you years of emotional suffering. Around 90% of women go through life without ever recognizing this powerful, subconscious pattern that silently controls their love life. This is not just another dating guide from an industry that doesn't want you to read this. The hidden truth Carl Jung uncovered about the male psyche explains why you, completely unconsciously, might be sabotaging your own chances at true love. And now comes something almost no one dares to say. A man who today seems madly in love with you might actually be projecting a psychological phantom onto your personality. And once that illusion shatters, a withdrawal becomes almost inevitable. What's most shocking is this. The more intensely a man shows his love in the beginning, the higher the likelihood that it's just a temporary projection. If you ignore this knowledge, you'll go through the same painful relationship cycle that millions of other women experience every single day. Every moment you spend without this understanding is a moment in which you unconsciously allow psychological forces to control your love life. What you're about to discover is a secret that could make all the difference between being abandoned and being truly loved. This knowledge is now available to you, but perhaps not for long. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists of all time, uncovered a fascinating and simultaneously destructive pattern in the male psyche that explains the very contradictions that may currently be tearing your relationship apart. Jung realized that the collective unconscious of men carries an archaic longing, a deep attraction to mystery and the unattainable. This primal force creates a cycle of longing and withdrawal that leaves millions of women hurt and confused every single day. The window to apply this knowledge to your own life is closing quickly. Today, before it's too late, we want to explore how Jung's theory of anima projection explains why men tend to fall in love with women who elude them, and how this understanding can help you radically transform your love life before you fall into the same trap again. The consequence of ignoring this knowledge could be years of your life spent living in illusions. Every day, without this awareness, is another day lost in the search for real connection. Prepare yourself for a profound journey through 5 psychological mechanisms identified by Jung, which decode this destructive dynamic. Each mechanism takes you deeper into the truth, until in the end, you will possess an understanding that very few people in the world ever reach. Mechanism number 1. The projection of the anima, the spirit in the mirror. What truly happens in the male mind when a woman pulls away? Get ready for a disturbing insight that explains why even the most intense love relationships often fall apart suddenly and without warning. Jung discovered a psychological phenomenon called the anima, the inner woman that every man carries within his unconscious mind. This powerful force influences male attraction in a way that most modern relationship experts completely overlook. This is the first crucial key to understanding why rejection often leads to obsession. When a woman pulls away, something unsettling happens. She becomes a blank canvas for the projection of this inner anima. The emptiness created by distance fills with idealized fantasies and raises the attraction to an obsessive level. The male mind begins to fill these gaps with its own perfect expectations, creating an idealized image of the woman that no real person could ever surpass. Do you see how this becomes a perfect psychological trap? Here comes the first painful truth that 99% of women never discover. If, after you've withdrawn, you become the object of intense male adoration, he isn't loving the real you. He's falling in love with a psychological illusion that he himself has created, a projection that will, sooner or later, shatter against reality. Have you ever wondered why so many men chase after a woman obsessively, only to lose interest the moment they win her? What unconscious force explains this irrational behavior that leaves so many women confused and hurt? The truth is, as soon as that distance disappears, the projection collides violently with reality, and the magic often breaks in painful ways. Think back to your past relationships. How often did you feel that the man wasn't in love with you, but with an idealized image he had created in his own mind? What might your love life have looked like if you had recognized this pattern earlier, before it robbed you of your chance at genuine happiness? Mechanism 2, emotional scarcity, when the unattainable becomes irresistible. Here comes a second insight that shatters everything you've believed about male attraction until now. Jungian psychology exposes a primitive, irrational mechanism in the male mind that hardly any man would ever admit. When a woman becomes unattainable, she activates an ancient cycle in the male unconscious, one that equates rarity with special value. This impulse is so deeply rooted that it operates entirely below conscious awareness. That's why a woman who is always available, loving and present, may, tragically, be perceived as less valuable, while one who withdraws emotionally becomes the desirable trophy. This realization is uncomfortable, but ignoring it could cost you years of unnecessary heartbreak. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt a mysterious attraction to someone who seemed indifferent to you, while overlooking those who genuinely offered you affection and care? What does that say about our deepest psychological patterns? Picture this situation. You meet two people. One shows clear interest, is warm and emotionally open. The other is distant, unpredictable, sometimes showing interest, then pulling away. Which of the two arouses your curiosity and desire more? Why is our psyche seemingly programmed to crave those who reject us? The answer to these questions reveals a pattern so deeply embedded in the collective unconscious that 99% of people remain trapped in it their entire lives, unless they recognize the next crucial factor. Mechanism 3, the archetype of the unattainable virgin, the mythological trap. Prepare yourself for the third truth that very few people know. Jung identified a powerful archetype hidden deep within the collective unconscious of men, the unattainable virgin. This is not just a psychological theory, it's an ancient force that unconsciously governs male behavior. When a woman withdraws, she awakens this archetype in the male psyche, triggering a near mythical attraction. The man enters an altered state of consciousness. He no longer reacts to the real woman, but to an archetypal image that ignites in him the hope for a profound inner transformation. Do you begin to see the hidden danger in this dynamic? The most important question now is, are your most intense relationships based on true love or on unconscious archetypal projections? This phenomenon explains why so many men feel they've finally become whole when they meet that one special woman who initially seemed out of reach. But think about it. What are your experiences with men who claimed they had never felt anything so deep before? How long did that magic truly last? What most people never fully understand is the tragic nature of this dynamic. These men are, in truth, projecting their own sense of potential inner wholeness onto a distant, unattainable female figure, and in doing so they become trapped in their own logic. And now comes perhaps the most unsettling question. Would you rather be intensely loved for an idealized projection that is bound to collapse, or moderately, but honestly, for who you really are? Mechanism 4, the shadow pattern, the wound that seeks the same blade. This fourth insight may be the most disturbing of all. Jung discovered an element in the human psyche he called the shadow, those parts of our personality that we suppress and reject. When a man becomes obsessively infatuated with a woman who withdraws from him, something dark begins to unfold. He is now being driven by his own shadow, connected to deep-seated feelings of abandonment and rejection. Here's what you need to understand. This pattern transforms the ancient male fear of not being enough into a compulsive attraction, specifically toward the woman who confirms that fear. It's like a psychological wound that repeatedly seeks the same blade in the unconscious hope of being healed by it. Have you ever noticed how men with deep insecurities often fall hardest for women who reject them? Jung would call this a dangerous shadow pattern. The man unconsciously attempts to heal his own wounds by winning over the very woman who inflicted them. This cycle can become addictive, destructive and painful, and often leads to relationships filled with intensity and ultimately abandonment. Few ever escape this vicious cycle, but the next mechanism contains the key to psychological liberation. Mechanism 5, the individuation cycle, when you become the mirror. We have now arrived at Jung's deepest insight into the male psyche. This idea can transform your entire understanding of relationships. Individuation is the process through which we become psychologically whole and integrated. For men, this often involves a deep, unconscious quest to reconnect with their inner feminine aspect. When a woman becomes distant, something paradoxical happens. She becomes the perfect mirror through which the man begins to confront his repressed feminine side. If you don't understand this mechanism, you may easily become just a tool in someone else's inner psychological process. This dynamic contains a dangerous contradiction. The more a woman withdraws and remains mysterious, the more she becomes a reflection of the unexplored inner world of the man. What he is truly searching for, without knowing it, is the reconnection with the lost parts of himself. And now comes the central question. Are you truly being loved for who you are, or are you merely a mirror in which someone hopes to recognize themselves? And here comes the most shocking realization. This very mechanism works in the opposite direction as well. It's uncomfortable to admit, but you too can project your animus, your inner male archetype, onto the men you meet. What feels like love at first sight is often nothing more than a strong, unconscious projection of your own masculine potential. Now that you are aware of these deep psychological mechanisms that Jung uncovered, we arrive at the turning point of this journey. I'm about to tell you something that many relationship experts don't even dare to think, let alone say out loud. The emotional tension you felt while reading this text was no accident. It mirrors exactly what happens in the male psyche during the projection process. Right now, in this very moment, you are experiencing the psychological pattern that quietly shapes your relationships. Here are 5 clear signs that you may have become someone's projection screen. How many of them do you recognize in your current or past relationships? 1. Idealization as a hidden trap. It begins when he attributes to you almost superhuman qualities, a level of perfection no real person can live up to. Watch for phrases like, "I've never met anyone like you," "You're different from all the others," "I feel like I've known you my whole life." Sound familiar? This idealization only intensifies if you maintain emotional distance. The hard truth, in that moment, he's not seeing you. He's seeing the psychological phantom he has created, and you will never be able to live up to it. 2. Obsessive attraction through rejection. Observe this dark pattern. The more you pull away, the more intense his interest becomes, to a disturbing degree. Constant messages, sudden gifts, dramatic declarations of love. These aren't signs of true connection with you as a person, but symptoms of a projection. This is the most dangerous phase, because obsession can easily turn into possessiveness. 3. Magnetic pull toward mystery. Like a moth to a flame, he feels drawn to the parts of you he doesn't understand. Instead of truly getting to know who you are, He constructs theories about what you think and feel. He's fascinated, not by your openness, but by what you withhold. In reality, he's desperately seeking a reflection of his own shadow in you. 4. A near mystical transformation. With burning eyes, he tells you how alive he feels around you. As if you've given him a new life, he describes euphoric, transcendent states as though you were some kind of magical drug. But this isn't love. It's an altered state of consciousness, a deep, archetypal projection rooted in primitive psychological processes. 5. The inevitable collapse, the final and most destructive sign. Once the distance disappears and he has won you, his interest vanishes like morning fog. The intensity is gone, the magic breaks, and he may even begin to feel repulsion. The brutal truth, he was never in love with you, but with the idealized image you, unconsciously, carried for him. Are you ready for the ultimate realization that can forever change your understanding of relationships? We've reached the climax of this journey into the depths of Jungian psychology. You now possess the hidden truth that Jung discovered in the male psyche. Knowledge that many would rather keep silent, but now you hold it. The paradoxical link between distance and attraction is not a game of seduction. It is an ancient psychological mechanism deeply rooted in the male collective unconscious. This understanding represents the peak of psychological insight into love and relationships. But here comes the turning point you've been waiting for. This insight is not meant to help you manipulate others, but to liberate yourself. Recognizing these dark dynamics is not cynicism, it is the first step out of the unconscious patterns that may have shaped your love life for years. When you recognize the projection, it loses its power over you. And now, the final truth. The real power of this knowledge does not lie in using distance to control others, but in the ability to recognize when you are being controlled by unconscious projections. True freedom begins when you can see through psychological illusions, whether they come from men or from women. Imagine being in a relationship where you are loved for who you truly are, not for the image of an archetype someone thinks they see in you. Imagine the freedom of no longer being the canvas for someone else's unconscious fantasies, but a real, authentic human being in a genuine, mutual connection. The most important question is not how you can use this knowledge to create attraction, but how you can overcome these primitive patterns and build a relationship grounded in reality, not illusion. Truly transformative love begins only when we stop being mirrors for someone else's unconscious projections and begin living fully present in our own complex humanity. What you do with this knowledge now will determine your romantic destiny. The choice is yours. The relational intelligence you've just gained contradicts everything mainstream advice tells you about attraction. This is rare and powerful psychological knowledge that can literally save you years of unnecessary emotional pain, but only if you act now, before unconscious patterns creep back in and once again take control of your love life. This Jungian wisdom about the male psyche is deliberately kept out of reach for many women because it reveals an uncomfortable truth about attraction. At this very moment, countless women around you are trapped in destructive cycles of idealization and abandonment, wondering why men pursue them passionately at first, only to suddenly lose interest. They suffer needlessly, unaware of the forces you've just come to understand. The window of opportunity to transform your relationships with this insight is closing quickly. Every day, thousands of women lose their chance at real connection because they remain stuck in cycles of projection. If you recognized any of the 5 warning signs in your current or past relationships, share this text now with someone who urgently needs it before she makes mistakes that can't be undone. It could mean the difference between years of pain and a single moment of liberation for someone you care about. Here's what I want you to do now. Look back on your love life and ask yourself honestly, which of these 5 projection patterns has shown up most often? Was it excessive idealization, obsession triggered by rejection, or maybe that near mystical transformation he claimed to experience in your presence. This is not a theoretical question. Your insight could spare another woman years of emotional pain. Share your experience in the comments below. Your courage to recognize this pattern might be the exact warning someone else desperately needs today. Subscribe and turn on notifications to receive the next post in this exclusive series on Jungian psychology. The next piece reveals a dangerous male archetype that every woman unconsciously projects. And understanding this pattern could instantly free you from a repeating cycle. This psychological wisdom about relationship dynamics won't be available forever. Join the community of women who have awakened to the hidden forces shaping their love lives. Your future self will thank you for taking this simple yet life-changing step today. And what if I told you that a man's most intense obsession, triggered when you reject him, actually has nothing to do with you, but instead reveals his deepest childhood wound, which he is unconsciously trying to heal through you? This psychological realization will forever change the way you interpret male behavior and free you from the habit of taking his reactions personally. Jung discovered something profound about the male psyche that few therapists dare to speak about openly. When a man falls obsessively for a woman who distances herself, he is in fact unconsciously trying to heal an ancient wound of rejection, one that originates from his relationship with his mother. Every boy undergoes a natural psychological separation from his mother, a necessary process to develop a male identity. But this separation always leaves an invisible wound, the longing for that unconditional love that once completely enveloped him. And here is the psychological mechanism that will forever change how you see relationships. When you create emotional distance, you unconsciously activate his long-forgotten childhood wound, the early rejection by his mother. His obsessive pursuit then no longer targets you as a person, but becomes a desperate attempt to heal that original injury which shaped his earliest emotional patterns. This creates a destructive cycle. The more you pull away, the more it triggers his fear of abandonment, which intensifies his obsession, often to pathological extremes. Paradoxically, if you become fully available, the internal tension that reminds him of that early wound disappears, and his interest begins to fade. Be brutally honest with yourself. In your past relationships, did you notice that men with deeper childhood trauma became especially obsessed when you pulled away? That's not a coincidence. It's the wounded boy inside the grown man, trying to heal himself by reliving and rewriting the original pain. What most people don't realize is that this cycle creates an emotional dependency stronger than any drug. The chemical cocktail released in the body during these phases of pursuit, bonding, and rejection produces a psychological addiction, one that can last decades if it remains unrecognized and unbroken. Ask yourself, are you unconsciously playing the role of the rejecting mother in your current relationship? Are you maintaining a pattern that can never lead to true, fulfilling connection? The most uncomfortable truth is, many women sense this dynamic and unconsciously use it to maintain control in the relationship. But that form of manipulation comes at a steep price. It keeps the relationship trapped in a neurotic loop, never allowing it to evolve into something real and healthy. We have now arrived at the deepest and most transformative point of this journey, where knowledge becomes power. Everything we've explored so far leads to this crucial question. How do you break free from this cycle of projection and rejection and create genuine, healthy connection? Jung offered an answer so profound that it is rarely mentioned in modern relationship advice, because it demands something that contradicts what your instincts might be telling you.